Hello, Molweni Sanu Hujambo. I'm Tembekile Mkhototo. Welcome to Unwrap Africa, where every Sunday we focus on the latest news, trends and successes of the African continent. Siyaqaqa. Coming up on the show tonight, Tanzania launches an almost $46 million infrastructure project aimed at boosting tourism in the country's south. And then later we bring you a wrap of the AU Heads of State and Government Summit from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. We'll get to those reports in a moment, but first our question tonight. What are your thoughts on the arrival of about 200 American troops to train Nigerian forces while the military there maintains full command? We'll take your thoughts on this. Find us on Facebook, SABC Unwrap Africa, and on X we are at SABC News_TV. These are the top stories from the continent this week. Kenyan cult leader Paul Mackenzie and 7 others have been issued with new charges over the deaths of 52 people whose bodies were found in the southeast of Kenya last year.
The military forces in Nigeria are lacking in some training. It will help boost the security of Nigerian military.
The Nigerian military, as we've been saying, says about 200 US troops who are due to arrive in the country in the coming weeks will not take part in combat action with Nigerian forces. Officials say the Nigerian military will retain full control over all security decisions. The Speaker of Ghana's Parliament has directed lawmakers to reintroduce the country's 2025 anti-LGBT bill for consideration. The Speaker has instructed the Business Standing Committee to prepare legislation for presentation to the House. The death toll from Madagascar cyclone Gizani has now risen to more than 30 as the Indian Ocean island nation is grappling with the storm's devastating impact. And in Ghana, thousands of cocoa farmers are struggling financially as they wait for the country's regulator to pay them for beans they delivered months ago. The regulator says it has about 50,000 metric tons of unsold cocoa currently sitting at ports. Well, Tanzania has launched an almost $46 million infrastructure project aimed at boosting tourism in the southern part of the country. Tourism is a key sector for the East African nation. It contributes about 17.5% of the country's GDP and supports around 1.5 million jobs nationwide. Here's the SABC's Isaac Lukando with the details.
A newly constructed airstrip at Nyerere National Park in southern Tanzania is now operational. Designed to accommodate tourist aircraft, it is one of 21 infrastructure projects valued at approximately $45.8 million that the government is rolling out to strengthen the country's tourism sector.
Inayofungua ukurasa mpya.
This marks an important step and opens a new chapter for the southern tourism circuit. For many years, people in southern Tanzania have been calling for improved access to these parks so that tourism can grow here just as it has in other parts of the country.
Beyond airstrips, the government says the investment includes the construction of visitor information centers, campsites, picnic areas, cottages, hostels and rest houses. The Tanzania Association of Tour Operators has long advocated for improved infrastructure in the south, describing the project as a welcome development for the industry. The association notes that reaching major tourist attractions in the north typically takes between 1 and 3 hours by road from nearby cities. In contrast, traveling by road from Dar es Salaam to key southern attractions can take up to 10 hours, a gap that has limited visitor numbers. Tanzania is globally known for iconic attractions such as Serengeti National Park, Mount Kilimanjaro and Zanzibar, most of which are located in the northern circuit. Through this infrastructure drive, however, the government aims to draw attention to lesser-known destinations like the Nyerere National Park in the south, an area roughly the size of Lesotho and regarded as Africa's largest standalone national park. Tourism earnings in Tanzania have grown steadily over the past 4 years, generating $4.2 billion last year, following intensified international marketing efforts.
Tourist arrivals have increased by 149% since this administration took office in 2021. The number has risen from about 900,000 visitors to more than 2.2 million tourists in 2025.
Despite the progress, industry players say more investment and time are needed to make the southern circuit fully accessible and commercially sustainable. This year, the government has set a target of attracting 5 million tourists and generating $6 billion in revenue. If achieved, authorities say, more Tanzanians will be able to benefit directly from the country's natural heritage. Isaac Lukando, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
In Zimbabwe, President Emmerson Mnangagwa this week chaired his first cabinet meeting of the year. Top of the agenda were constitutional amendments, or a constitutional amendment number 3. It's widely seen as paving the way for him to remain in power until at least the year 2030. While some legal experts say that a public referendum is needed in Zimbabwe, but the country's Justice Minister, Ziyambi, says that the constitution can be amended without a public referendum.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa earlier this week chaired his first cabinet meeting of the year. Top on the agenda was constitutional amendment number 3, widely seen as paving the way for him to remain in power until 2030. Some legal experts say a public referendum is required, but Zimbabwe's Justice Minister Ziyambi maintains that the constitution can be amended without a public referendum.
Because this is a constitutional bill, it doesn't need referral to the Parliamentary Legal Committee. So once we introduce it, we then start the second reading stage, where we then introduce the bill formally in Parliament and debate will commence in Parliament. Once the second reading is done, we then go into committee, and that process, it depends on the parliamentary calendar. I cannot speak on how long it will take, but once it's gazetted, it can even take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, depending on the business of Parliament, what is it that we want to do. But basically, that's the process.
Law experts say they have already begun the process of fighting the proposed changes and will not allow a few people to take away the power of the majority.
No person in this country has the power from nowhere, from the secrets of your meetings or bedrooms. Just come up with far-reaching proposals and say, these are the proposals. Within 90 days, we will actually be changing the constitution. That is not part of the mandate that they were given to govern the country. So if you are the president, you're not given the mandate to change the way in which we are governed, or even to make proposals. If you are parliament, you have no mandate to actually then say, well, we are here, we are given 5 years to be parliamentarians, we now want to give to ourselves a further. I mean, it's completely unthinkable. So I should say that the proposals don't make sense and that they shouldn't be part of our constitution.
Civil society organizations have echoed calls for a national referendum, insisting that any change proposed by the Mnangagwa administration must be subjected to direct public approval.
Term limits are a foundational core component of the Constitution of Zimbabwe as we agreed to it in 2013. One of the basic principles we also agreed with was that the Constitution was so fundamental that it won't be altered, and that there were certain provisions that would not be altered without the consent and express consent and approval of the people of Zimbabwe. Anyone who wants to amend a term limit provision will require a referendum to amend and remove the term limit. We said in section 328, if you do manage to succeed in a referendum to remove a term limit, that term limit will not benefit you as an incumbent. And we said, for it to benefit you as an incumbent, you have to go to another referendum.
The cabinet proposal has triggered intense political debate, and tension is mounting in the country. But with a highly fragmented opposition, a sustained resistance is limited.
And the last and the most important line of defense is the people of Zimbabwe. In certain cases, the people of Zimbabwe will defend the Constitution via a referendum. That power to defend the Constitution has been taken from the people of Zimbabwe. The Constitution bill is going to be debated by Parliament, which is made up of men and women who directly stand to benefit from this bill. They are going to determine whether they accept the bill or not on behalf of the masses. After which, the bill is going to the president, who is a person who is going to directly benefit from this bill. So there is a conflict of interest of cataclysmic levels. There is clear conflict of interest. People who directly stand to benefit are sitting in judgment of any issue that benefits them.
Some have already approached the Constitutional Court to challenge the plan to extend Mnangagwa's term.
That kind of an arrangement is going to violate the Constitution. More so if you look at section 328. We are saying they should not benefit from this kind of an amendment because they are the incumbent, they are the ones that are in office now.
Critics warn that Zimbabwe's legislature, which is heavily dominated by Mnangagwa's ruling ZANU-PF party, will pass the amendment, effectively leading to the suspension of the 2028 elections, thereby throwing the country into a constitutional and diplomatic crisis. SABC News.
Let's go back to our question tonight, and we've asked you what your thoughts are on the arrival in the coming days of about 200 American troops who are meant to train Nigerian forces while the local military maintains full command. Let's see what you've had to say. Tabo says that very wrong. The US is now openly recolonizing the world. We need stronger, independent Africa, so a stronger, independent Africa. South Africa is one of the countries that could invest more into military to defend Africa. Cape Communist says American military presence within the ISIS coalition of conflicts should be seen as service. Another one here says that Nigeria should consider itself an African giant, or considers itself an African giant, yet it can't defend itself from Boko Haram, who fight with flip-flops. What a pity. America doesn't work for free. They will need oil rights as payment for the protection. 20, 30 years. I think 20, 30 years now. And Nature, I think that's a pseudonym, says here, Africa hates themselves. The problem of one of African's nations is that the problem of one African nation is its problem alone, but the success of an African nation is success of every African. That's where the problem lies. We are so divided as a continent. The next neighbor doesn't care if the other is burning or dying. Riley says Nigeria is incapable of ruling itself as a sovereign nation. If they couldn't combat insecurity, let the great power do it for them. Well, this is Unwrap Africa. When we return, we focus on developments coming out of the AU summit that's just wrapped up in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Thanks for staying with Unwrap Africa on SABC News. The African Union Heads of State and Government Summit has wrapped up in Ethiopia. The theme for this year's gathering was sustainable water and sanitation. The summit also discussed peace and security on the continent. SABC specialist correspondent Sophie Mukwena spoke to brand specialist Tebe Ikalafeng in Addis Ababa.
This is Zenawi Hall. This hall is named after the former Prime Minister of this country who worked with the former South African President Thabo Mbeki. You'd recall that they were both the founding fathers of the NEPAD, that was a blueprint for the development of the continent. And today we have an exhibition here, by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. But with me, I have a South African who has traveled the length and breadth of Africa, Thebe Ikalafeng, who is here also at the AU Summit. I'm going to talk to him about the exhibition, but also what he has observed in terms of the content and the approach the AU took this year at this summit. And Thebe, let's talk about the AU first before we get to this exhibition. The AU today, my observation is that it was too packed to an extent that even walking around was a problem. And when you look at people who were here, are your ordinary people from different sectors of society, including business, politics, and also from other regions as well. But when I looked at the leadership, it was quite glaring for me that some of the leaders were not here. And what can we read from that? Are we still on course in terms of commitment to develop the continent under the leadership of the continental body, the AU? Is there still a political will for leaders to attend this gathering?
I think what you've said is so important, what you've observed is so important, that you've observed ordinary people as well as the leadership being here. So to me, it speaks about the AU now finally becoming the people's union, represented, of course, by the leadership. We don't have to have all the presidents here. What we have to have those presidents who are willing to work. I mean, I started my morning with President Mahama at the Accra Reset. And part of the things that he talked about at the Accra Reset, which was attended by former AUC chairperson Nkosazana and President Obasanjo and Haile Mariam from Ethiopia. And what they spoke about the need to move from rhetoric to action. So to me, there was a big shift in that way. There was a shift as well in terms of the focus of the AU now, the focus of saying that enough about talking, it's time now to get political sovereignty, financial sovereignty, and narrative sovereignty, which are perhaps the three major themes which are coming through to me this year. I don't think we can misread and say that perhaps not all the presidents were here, that there's no interest in the African Union. This is actually the time when we need the African Union the most. And the presidents who are here, to me, represents those presidents who are willing, as I've seen, with different presidents holding different bilaterals as well as side events. It speaks to the idea that they understand that we don't have to be in the same room to solve the problems of the continent. We can solve them from different areas of interest.
South Africa is now part of the Peace and Security Council. Earlier on Saturday, the president gave an address calling on his peers to ensure that indeed the issue of peace and security takes a center stage with all the different challenges that we see on the continent, whether you're talking Sudan, DRC, and also Cabo Delgado. What do you think will be South Africa's impact or input in the Peace and Security Council in the coming months?
Well, if you go all the way back to 1963, you look at Kwame Nkrumah's blueprint to solve the challenges of the continent. Security independence was always one of the pillars of how we're going to solve the problems of the continent. I think by having South Africa now in an influential role, means that now we can have a real voice around matters of security in the continent. Because what's happened now, if you look at whether it's the Congos, or whether it's the Malis and all those, is that our challenges have always been our solutions have always been outsourced outsourced. But now by having South Africa in a critical position to be able to speak for the continent, in the same way that you follow up from the G20, how South Africa centralized the challenges of the continent or the priorities of the continents in the declaration. But being in that position, to me, also says that we can now drive the peace and security of the continent on our own terms.
Let's look at the exhibition. You spoke about Kwame Nkrumah and the founding father of the Organization of African Unity. But now, here is the exhibition. Another founding father of the not OAU this time around, but the AU. What does this symbolize,
Well, if you look at the AU was rebranded, the OAU was rebranded in 2002 in Durban by President Thabo Mbeki. And where we are with this exhibition around us is the African Renaissance 15-year anniversary exhibition. And it really also speaks to the broader themes of even of the AU, which is it's about time for Africa to go beyond dialogue, but to solving the problems of the continent by Africans themselves. And I think what you can also begin to see, is obviously focusing on culture, and we know that culture is the foundation for us as Africans to reclaim our global significance. And what we are seeing here, as it says, for 15 years, the Mbeki Foundation has been a platform for bold dialogue, convening thinkers, leaders, communities, and young people to reimagine Africa's future. That is what this exhibition is about, which the President should be opening soon.
Now this one, for me, it's quite important. Making your mark, change the face of Africa. How do we change the face of Africa? Take us through this.
Well, part of the challenge of the continent has been the narrative of the continent has always been outsourced. The narrative of the continent has been, if you look at some of the themes around here, about brain drains, about debt, about colonialism, xenophobia, poverty. The challenge has been that many of these themes have been used to create a narrative about the continent that is out of control and not in charge of its own narrative. And what you see, it says, make your mark, change the face of Africa. So it says that each and every one of us has got a role to play in changing the continent and changing the continental narrative.
Thank you so much for your time. I think this is quite important when you look at the issue of poverty as well, as we know that one issue that today President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke about is how can the world, not only the continent or South Africa, come together to have a committee, men and women, who look at inequality. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And have a wonderful time here. And I think all of us are here to try and deal with the triple diseases of the continent, which is poverty, inequality, and poverty and inequality. That's the challenge that we need to try and solve as a continent.
That was Tebe Igalafeng here at the Zenawi Center, where there's exhibition of the African Renaissance. Quite important to look back at the history of the continent.
Welcome back to Unwrap Africa. Before we go tonight, Ethiopian coffee is renowned as the birthplace of coffee Arabica, celebrated for its high-altitude beans with fruity flavors. SABC News special correspondent Sophie Mukwena got to try it out for us.
Ethiopia, the land of the origins, a cup of coffee is a way to demonstrate its warm hospitality. The Ethiopian coffee is mostly produced by small farmers. The traditional coffee ceremony often lasts for 3 hours. It includes roasting, grinding, and brewing. It serves as a social gathering. Tourists from different countries enjoy the aroma at their hotels.
I love it. I'm not as descriptive as she is, but it's beautiful. Healthy. Very, very healthy.
There's no alcohol, which is something you don't see in any other places, hotels, so we're very pleased.
So when visiting Ethiopia, don't miss the opportunity to enjoy its unique and famous coffee. Sophie Mkwene, SABC News, Ethiopia.
And on that note, we'll wrap it up for this week's edition of Unwrap Africa here on SABC News. We're back with you Sunday, 8 p.m. Until then, take care and stay with SABC News. Bye-bye.